Okay, we are here with Roger and Judy Willcut, and they are going to give us some more information to get to know them better for the fellowship team today. And thank you both for being here and letting me come into your home and do this interview. It's going to be exciting for me to get to know more about both of you, so I can have secrets. Yes. All right. So, when did you become members of our church, and what influenced you to join UCC Yankton?
You can answer first because you were a member first.
Okay. I joined the UCC church in Yankton in about 1970, 71 when I moved here to Yankton. And I remained a member for even left here and went to Hawaii for a tour of duty and then retired from the military. Oh, moved back, lived in Vermilion, was stationed at Vermilion, and then I retired in 1977. And we I stayed in the church all that time. So,
Why did you?
well, why did I become my? At that time, I was married to Judy Willcut, and she passed away in 1990. Oh, don't record that. Anyway, I can't remember the year right now, but we moved here. And our daughter, Terry Kay, was just going into middle school. And so we had been married in a Methodist church, and I was baptized and grew up in a kind of a first Christian church, was what they called disciples, I guess. And but most of my life was spent in the military, where I went to simply a Protestant chapel. So we started looking at churches here in Yankton, and for one thing or another, Judy didn't like the attitude of one of the pastors, and I don't know, but we came to the United Church of Christ Congregational and sat up in the balcony, and it was a group of people that were very accepting. At that time, we had a lot more members, but there was many school teachers, which of course she is, but there were school teachers, and so pretty well a much larger membership of mixed ages, as opposed to the kind of the stratification we're sort of seeing now. And so that's how I got here, and that's why I stayed here. I mean, that's why.
Mm-hmm.
And I joined probably the mid-1990s. Ms. Roger and I got married in 93, and he was going to church at the United Church of Christ. And so, I went with him for a while, and I felt like it was a place that I could be comfortable. They were very welcoming and non-judgmental.
Yeah, those are the two things we really enjoyed too.
And so I basically joined because it was where he was going, and I knew he liked it, and I thought I could too, and I did.
Good. All right, so if you had advice to give to someone today, what advice would you give them? And it doesn't have to be about church, it can be about life.
Keep an open mind. Just be involved, but don't feel like you have to be in charge.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
So, I'm not really an advice giver.
I think you
I'm
just
more-
model. your
Well,
advice.
I am more, accepting of all the different ways people do stuff. Everybody's got a plan, a reason for doing what they do, and
Yeah.
I can go with that.
Mm-hmm. Don't struggle so much when you just let people be.
Right. I know I can't change what other people do, so I know they don't want my advice most of the time, so I just don't give it.
What about you, Roger?
Well, I'm quite different from her. I think everything would be just fine if everybody would be reasonable and do it my way.
Mm.
But actually, you know, an advice that I'd like to give to anybody who may be listening to or viewing this audio that is not a member of a church someplace or does not have a church home, that in all the years that I was in the military and when I was in Vietnam, I spent 3.5 years in Vietnam, and the one string that always has like a tail on a kite for me has been a connection with a church, not necessarily a church like we would all know a church today, but a church. I mean, there have been times in my life where I went to church services in the hospital because they could always find a short church service at a hospital. But from the time of 1961 to now, 1971 until now, United Church of Christ Congregational has been my home, even though I haven't been here. And I know, and I hope that the kids, Judy's kids and Judy, if things ever get bad, they can always remember, and anybody else can remember, that your church home, no matter whether it's UCC or not, but your church home will always be there for you. And I think will always be there for you. And so I encourage people to give it a try.
Yeah. Thank you for your service also.
Yep. Thank you.
So let's go back in time. When you were going to school, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Tolstoy, South Dakota.
So where is that?
It is in north central South Dakota. I would say if you draw a triangle with Mobridge, Aberdeen, and
Pierre.
maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like right out in the middle of nowhere there.
So what did your family do?
Well, my dad was kind of a farmer, but we lived in Tolstoy. When my parents were first married, they lived on the farm and then moved to town, but my dad still had a little bit of land, rented land from people, and so had always done a little bit of farming, had some cows that were just down the street at the edge of town, so they were in the country. And then when he was older, he did things like, I was the custodian at the school and drove a school bus, and so, you know, I grew up in town, but it was more like living on a farm.
Okay. Probably a small town, right?
Yeah, very small. We used to say it had 100 people in it, but I think that 50 would be maybe stretching it now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know how your family got there?
They immigrated from Russia. They were German Russians that had Germans who moved to Russia following a German queen who married a Russian or something, and they'd been promised lots of wonderful things, and they didn't like how things were going in Russia, and so they immigrated to the United States in the late 1800s, and then homesteaded.
Okay.
So my grandparents
Hence the name
homesteaded.
Tolstoy.
Yeah, right. And so my parents were actually born in the United States, but my grandparents were immigrants.
Yeah, like a lot of people around here. Yeah. Do you know how they got here, your grandparents?
Yeah, actually, can't tell you off the top of my head, but one of my brothers did some research trying to figure out where our family came from and how they got here, and put it all together in a book. And so he has the actual, manifest from the ship that they were on. So they came on the ship and landed in New York.
Okay.
And then I don't know how they got from New York to South Dakota.
Probably on the railway.
Probably.
From what I'm hearing from other people in the area. and their families that immigrated this way. Yeah.
So it's kind of cool to have had someone in the family who took the time to do all of that research,
Right.
and it was before the days of the
Internet,
internet
yep.
when he
Yep.
started looking for that. So it was a big job, but
Yeah.
very interesting to know.
So you walked to school
Yeah, it was just like,
Yeah. blocks away.
yeah.
Did you have chores at home?
Oh yeah, but I was the baby of the family. So
How many are in your family?
8.
8?
Yes. So I knew how to milk a cow, but I didn't really
Didn't have to.
Didn't really have to, and I didn't like chickens, so I didn't have to. I didn't have to go get eggs or anything like that.
Okay.
And actually, Tolstoy only had a 1 through 8 school.
Okay.
So then, if you wanted to go to high school, you had to go somewhere else.
Where did you go?
Gettysburg,
Okay.
which was about 30 miles away.
And did you take a school bus? Did they have one that?
No, you had to pick where you wanted to go to high school. And so the first year, well, I might as well tell the real story.
There you go.
Okay.
So-
There you go. There you go.
So my older sisters, my 3 oldest sisters did not go to high school. They went to 8th grade, and then my dad didn't think that they needed to continue. They
Okay.
could get a job and help to pay for things that the family needed. But my brothers went to high school because boys needed
Uh-huh.
an education. And then the sister that was closest to me did actually go to high school because, and this, the story kind of was that there was some event at church or something, and someone shamed my father into
Oh.
she needed to go to high school, so she did. So then when I came along, I could go to high school too. So the closest town was Hoven, which was 10 miles from where we lived.
Okay.
Where brothers went.
And my brothers went to high school there, but I couldn't go there because it was a Catholic school.
Ah.
And my dad was sure that if he let me go to high school there, that I would marry a Catholic.
I see.
So I had to go to Gettysburg. And so the first year, he found a woman who went back and forth to Gettysburg every day to take her daughter to school. And then she cleaned houses during the day while we were in school and came back. And so I did that my freshman year in high school. And I was not very happy doing that. So when I was starting my sophomore year of high school, I found a job
Ah.
in Gettysburg and a room to rent.
Oh,
And
wow.
Then
In
lived.
high school?
Yeah.
Huh.
So, and then actually my sister moved back to Gettysburg for a year while her husband was in Vietnam. So I ended up living with her
Okay.
most of my sophomore year of high school. And then when I was a junior and senior, I was on my own.
Miss Independence.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. And then when you finished high school, what did you do?
I went to college in Aberdeen and I became a teacher,
And what did you teach?
special education.
So did I.
And so I graduated from college in 1970
Okay.
and came to Yankton. And
Why Yankton?
because they offered me a job.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It was easy. So
Yeah.
yeah, well, it's okay. And then taught here for 49 years and
Oh my goodness.
retired 3 years ago and
Oh
never left.
boy, what changes you have seen.
Oh, it's been a roller coaster.
Yes, and still
Things-
is.
Yeah, everything comes and goes.
Yes, it does,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Wow. Well, thank you for your service in
Yeah,
that
well,
field.
you're welcome.
Amen.
You know, yeah, yeah.
Have her tell you what her children do for what kind
Okay.
of jobs they have now, though.
Well, Natasha,
Right,
interpreter, is my daughter.
right. Oh, okay. No, didn't know that.
Yeah, she's my oldest daughter.
I know that you guys talk all the time, but
Oh, that's
didn't-
why.
Okay, yeah, okay.
And she was a special education teacher for, I don't know, probably 14 years.
Yeah.
And now the last 2 years she's taught first grade.
Okay.
And then I have another daughter who's a special education teacher in Minneapolis.
Oh my.
And I have a son who, I don't know, he was a theater major in college and spent some time doing theater related stuff, building sets and such.
Yeah.
And ended up in Nashville, and his, the company he worked for there built like sets and props and things for trade shows.
Okay.
So there weren't a lot of those during COVID.
Right.
So he didn't have a job.
Okay.
So he, started looking for jobs, and he found a job as a teacher's assistant in an elementary school right down the street from where he is, working with special education kids.
Oh, imagine that.
And now is actually working to become certified as a special education teacher with a program that his school is
Good
doing.
deal.
So it seems to be kind of contagious and
I
running
think
the family.
so. Yeah, I think so. That's amazing. Good deal. Change some people's lives. It's pretty neat.
Well, maybe.
You do.
Yeah.
You do.
You just
Yeah.
don't always see it right away
Yeah, that's true that's very true.
for a lot of things.
Yep, a lot of things. I know working here with ABS, I think it's just an amazing company that we have here in Yankton for people with special needs, compared to what other much larger cities have.
So do you work at ABS?
I do.
I
Till the
didn't
end
know
of the
that.
till the end of the month. Then
Till
I
the end of the month?
retire. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, then I retire at the end of the month. But yes, I started out when I graduated from the University of Wisconsin in special ed. I had been working with a gal who was living with her parents, and I transitioned her to living in a situation group home like that, and with a company there, and did transitional work because deinstitutionalization, remember that word, was really big then in the 80s. And so that's what I did initially, and then when I moved to St. Louis, I taught for a little bit, and in Wisconsin I taught for a little bit, but it was just not in St. Louis. They have a special school district still.
so
One of
not
three,
very
not very inclusive.
liberal.
Yeah, not very inclusive. And me, I have kind of a big mouth. I think people are starting to figure that out about me. Anyway, it didn't work real well. So anyway, but it's good to have sisterhood in that. I love the people that I work with, and we call them people we support now. And I really like that
That's
term.
a good word.
It's a great word.
Mhm.
So yeah, lots of change in that respect as well, just terminology. So I thought that's pretty cool. So what about you? Where did you grow up?
Oh, I grew up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. My mother had two children. With my father was a military person.
Okay.
He is, and so we lived in Sioux Falls until she got divorced from this first husband, and we moved to Panama City, Field, Florida, and my mother remarried a different military person.
Okay.
And then, so from the time of about 43, or for 1942 or 43, sometime at that time, had been in the military as a military dependent. Most of the rest of my life before I actually went in the military myself. And so whenever my dad would go to Korea, or he was in World War II, and then went to Korea, and then we would always go back to Yankton or to Sioux Falls Sioux Falls, and we'd go to Grandma's because that's where my grandma was, and my Aunt Joyce, who belonged to this church for a while, from Sioux Falls, she came down here. But that was always home base, and I joined the Army when I was 17 and dropped out of high school and joined the Army when I was 17. I spent 21 years in the military. I served most of the time like in the Far East, but I had tours that I served in Germany, in Hawaii, and in Vietnam, and Okinawa, and Thailand, and Taiwan, and
Wow.
Korea, and Philippines, and
Have you been back non-militarily, just to any place?
no, I have not. She watches a lot of these home shows. I mean, home buyers or home finders or whatever, and I see the pictures now of places that I was at in Vietnam, and I mean, it wouldn't make any sense to me going back because when I was there, my first trip to Okinawa or to Vietnam was in 1962, which is a long time ago, and the war that was just beginning. Everything was just beginning, but there's no comparison of what it looks like, what those places are like now, and what they were when I was there. The same thing in Korea. I was in Korea in 1957, 56 and 57, something like that. But back when I was a teenager, but while I was in school, in high school, I went to high school at Fountain, Colorado, which is where Colorado Springs is. I went to high school at Fort Knox, Kentucky. They used to have a full school there. I went to school in Nuremberg, Germany, and I used to ride the train from where we lived in Germany, which was Straubing. No, it was, Straubing to Nuremberg, where the American Firth actually, which was where the American high school was, and we'd ride the train up on Sunday night, and we'd ride the train home again on Friday for school and stayed in a dorm in Nuremberg.
Oh, wow.
It was a long time, but I dropped out when I was 17 and joined the Army.
So you were pretty much an Army brat the whole time?
Yes, I was. Okay. But, because of the falling of Korea, World War II and then Korea, that whole period there, most of my family connection really was with my grandmother and grandpa and my uncles up there in Sioux Falls, because my stepfather was gone long time, lots in that period of time. So that had always been home to me. So, and then I went in the Army as a high school dropout. About 9 years, about halfway into, about 10 years into a 21-year tour of service, I went to officers candidate school and received a commission. And so when I retired in 1977, I was a major.
Wow.
And I had attained a master's degree through going to school, and first on a bootstrap program, and then a lot of it beginning before bootstrap, and then my master's degree was in a non-traditional kind of a setting, University of Michigan, Central Michigan. I would say Michigan. I went to University of Michigan, and she'll say, it was Central Michigan. So, but I got my undergraduate degree at university, and I got my master's degree at Michigan. And but I retired in 1977, and I started my appraisal business, Willcut Appraisals, and I actually was effectively an appraiser for that whole period of time until I closed the door because of COVID a couple of years ago. Yeah. Whenever that came in, I just couldn't be going into people's houses.
Right.
And along the way, I had brief stints where in the 1980s, I kept my appraisal business going, but I worked put the proposal together and worked with the team, and we developed certification standards for drug and alcohol counselors in the state of South Dakota. And South Dakota became the fourth state with national recognition for drug and alcohol counselors being certified.
Thank you for that.
And then I went from here, went to the University of Missouri, to the state of Missouri, where I was the deputy director for drug and alcohol there, and with the same idea. They had a certification standard, but it needed to be tweaked a little bit. But my first wife came to Missouri, and so she had a good job. So, when my job ran out at the University at the state of Missouri, I just became the chief appraiser for the state of Missouri for about a year and a half, and then my first wife got transferred to Oklahoma City, and I did drug and alcohol counselor certification development in Oklahoma, and then when Judy Willcut passed away, I'm back to Yankton, and so.
And how did you two meet?
We don't. You answer that.
Oh, well, we met when you lived here in the early 70s,
Yeah.
right? My first husband and I ran a drive-in restaurant
Oh,
down where Rogers Family Pharmacy is,
okay,
right behind there,
Oh.
the long, narrow building.
okay.
And so met lots of people as they
Yeah.
came in and out, having something to eat, and so Roger was someone who was a friend of our family.
Cool. And after everybody separated, divorced, died, and everything, what happened?
We got married.
I was 53 years old and I married a woman with 5 kids. What can you say? The youngest was 4 and the oldest was 17.
I'd say
Something like that.
thank you is what I would say.
Oh, I would say.
I think the two of you can thank each other. For
I would tell you that blended families are not an easy thing,
No?
but the results of a blended family, at least for me, as I reach this 29 years with this woman here,
Yeah.
you've seen grandson Owen Phillips up there, with the
Yeah.
singing and doing
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, and then Rosina, she was the announcer on the Christmas show, if you remember. So, and so it's been good for me. They've kept me on my toes. So it's been I don't know. She and I just were always easy together, though. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah. I think that's wonderful.
you know, so.
And you guys have been through a lot
Mm.
together. I know, especially just since I've been here. So what in your lifetime would you say is something that has really changed you today to who you are? Is there any like turning points that you can look at and say, that was a really good thing that I did?
Well, for me, I'll go ahead and answer. Of course, when you had so many things, I've done really so many different
Yes,
things.
you have.
But the one thing I think that changed my life, probably more than anything else, was in my first tour in the military, I had a really spotty record. I had I was a private more than once, and I was a sergeant more than once, and I was a corporal more than once. But my daughter was born in 1960, and at that time I was still a high school dropout, and I knew how far I was going to go if I didn't do some things different. And so somehow or another, I changed my life when my daughter was born, and took advantage of the opportunities that were available to me in the military. And I also was extremely lucky in Vietnam because of the way things fell. You know, it's a short step between hero and bum or dead, you know. So that really, and I've had mentors along the way who have been extremely helpful. Even, I mean, even now, Don Kettering has been a mentor of mine for many years. And so that was the one thing of my daughter, I'd say that was the single thing.
Yeah. How about you?
Oh, I would imagine my youngest son was born with a birth defect, and had, you know, a multitude of medical issues, and you know, still does, and is deaf. And so as a special education teacher, that put me in a different position.
Right.
You know? And I think maybe helped me to be able to see things from a parent's perspective, and, you know, what they're thinking, what they're doing, and you know, made me more effective in that respect. And, you know, then I learned way more than I ever wanted to learn about everything medical in the world. So
Wow, yeah, it
you know,
would.
Jake probably had, I don't know, 25 or 30 surgeries growing up, and
Major surgeries.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, we kept him alive. You
Yeah.
know, he's grown up to be a
Right.
healthy young man.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting when we look back on things, and yeah. So, in your looking back over what you remember of your grandparents and great grandparents, I know we touched on that a little bit, but do you know what they did work-wise? Probably yours were in farming.
We're farmers.
Yeah. What about you, Roger? Great grandparents?
Oh, my great grandparents were, one was a farmer, and the other one was worked in penitentiary settings.
Oh, wow.
He was first down in south of, doesn't make any difference, right along the river, south of, I can't come up with it.
Yeah.
But anyway, south of, whatever.
Somewhere in Iowa.
Somewhere in Iowa, along the river, there was a big old prison there, and then he moved from there up to Sioux Falls, and he was with the prison up in Sioux Falls.
Do you know how did your grandparents immigrate over here from, or was it?
My great on my father's side, they ended up in Burlington, Iowa. That's where in the Burlington area.
Okay.
And they were probably Irish, Welsh Irish, or
Okay.
something like
Okay.
that. And my grandfather on the other side were probably English, something like
Okay.
that. And I don't really know for sure when or however they came here. I think my great-great-grandparents were here before hers were, though, because I have more, I think I have more generations I have pictures of.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, well, of course, I'm so much older than this woman anyway. That's the other thing. So, yeah. my grandfather, um, my grandfather was a guy with always had a great idea, and but unfortunately always showed it to people too soon.
Oh.
But he had been a farmer up in Oldham, South Dakota, and during the dirty 30s, they ended up having to move into Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and he and one of his cousins, they started working on cars in the garage or something like that. My grandfather was a really handy person, mechanically inclined. But back in the days before he left Oldham, that was when every little town had a baseball team. My grandfather was a really good baseball player. And so they moved to Sioux Falls, started mechanicking in the garage, and then he ended up getting hired at International Harvester with doing big tractor repairs and all of that stuff in a big shop there. And he was the shop foreman for quite a few years, and then he was just tired of working for somebody else. And so he started at one of these gas stations like we had in the old days. We had 2 pumps, and we had 4 bays. You had a flat bay, a pit, a hoist, a wash rack, and he was a great mechanic, and he did wonderful work. He did everything great except collect bills. Grandpa was not a businessman. And all the years that he was doing all of that stuff, my grandma was a seamstress. And she ended up working for some of the larger stores that were in fashion, and some of them still are in Sioux Falls. I think names that come to mind is Buttrey's and another one. But she did everything. And she kept 815 South Duluth. She kept that because my grandpa would be just like me. Get a loan and start a business or something. And she kept the 80 acres that out in Cherokee, Iowa, that she had been gifted or inherited from her side of the family, because that's where they came from Cherokee, Iowa. So those are my 2 grandfathers. That's what they did.
Wow. Interesting. I wish I knew more about my heritage, but I don't know a whole lot. Being adopted, you don't know a lot of that. Yeah. I know a little bit, but I met my biological grandmother when I was 40, and my birth mother had died when I was 10 in a car wreck. But I found that out at 40. But she gave me a little history, but not a lot. And I do need to try and get in contact with the uncles and aunts that I have. It would be good.
It would be interesting.
Yeah, it would be. It would be. So I wanted to go back. I forgot to ask this. How did you do this drug and alcohol thing? What got you interested in that?
So it was a period of time in the real estate industry where interest rates were running at 19%. So I was, I had an appraisal shop here in town. I mean, I've always been an independent. Well, not always. Independent. There have been times where I worked for others, but at that time I had my appraisal business, and I had 2 ladies working for me full time, and they both needed a job. I didn't need a job so much because I was already retired, and I was married, and Judy had, income, so I was okay. But they didn't have okay. So I saw this ad in the paper about they wanted somebody to do this thing and, implement and write up and keep books and, I don't know, a bunch of administrative stuff. Well, I can do administrative stuff. So I went up and checked into it, and so I met with the people that were trying to put it together, and it was like Department of Social Services, the Division of Drug and the Division of Alcohol, and state vocab rehab, and I'm missing one other state thing. But anyway, and the plan was we get these people from the state, and then we get that many people who are counselors or counselor certification, and a representative from the University of South Dakota where they had a drug and alcohol studies program, and then one person from out. And this 11 people and me would develop a sheet of paper, clean. And so, well, I think I could do this. So they thought, they believed me. And so the problem was, these are drug and alcohol counselors, and they go on to the School of Hard Knocks, and they don't need no stinking education, some of them. And over here you got the state, and they want this, and so I went, and I started out. Made a contact with the Navy, and went to out in California. And the Navy had a excellent training program for drug and alcohol counselors, and it was a program that was, to me, was a lot like South Dakota. I mean, you had people all over the world, and so they couldn't go to one central place, and that would be kind of like this. And to make a long story short, Charles Petrie was the guy there, and he said, take anything you want. And so I took everything that I wanted out of it, and I put it all together, and I took it to those 11 people. And they told me what they didn't want, but we narrowed it all down, and it worked out much to the benefit of clients who ended up getting treated by people who were better, at least better screened. I mean, just because a person does all that stuff doesn't mean they're going to be a good counselor.
Correct.
But at least they've been screened for being able to identify some things. So it was kind of exciting. But in the meantime, I just kept the other stuff going. I mean, one of the ladies that worked for me was best secretary I ever had. And I'd be going down the road, and I'd stop at a payphone, and I would have recorded on my recorder a whole bunch of stuff, yada, yada, yada. And so I get a payphone.
Oh, my.
And I'd yada, 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 yada her, and I'd drive on, and I'd get to pier, and it would be waiting for me, whatever the heck it might have been or something. And every third or fourth day, I'd sit on with Beverly Gim, was a person here in town who used to work for me, and she ended up buying my business when I went to Mobridge, to Missouri. But she would, we'd go out on Monday or one day a week, and we'd look at a bunch of properties, and then I'd go off and do this other stuff, and then I'd come back and I'd do whatever I wanted to do with whatever she had done, and Lisa would make it look pretty, and off it'd go, and off for another week. It was, but I was young.
Right. But I was young. Yeah.
And it was, I look back at this, the possibility that I was going to be successful at that was just unmeasurable. I mean, how it ever worked, I don't have a clue.
Right.
But you get lucky. I mean, and that's the story of my life. I've been lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've
been lucky. Lucky in the Army. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Vietnam, but I got one Purple Heart, but I'm okay. And I'm lucky in my business. I saw that I recognized that I had to do something in that period of time. And then later on in life, as it got towards the end, she was just happy that I could make enough money to stay at the office and not bother her all the time.
And then you retired.
When she retired, she said, I'm retired. But you said?
I said, give me a year, because he'd been talking about retiring forever.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, ready to retire until I was. And when I was, I knew that I was, and I did it. And
Right.
So anyway, I said, don't retire yet. Give me 1 year, just 1 year to be at home alone. So
Good.
he almost made it.
Made it. COVID screwed everything
Oh,
up.
well, yeah, there is that.
Yeah, there's that. So.
What have you guys learned during that COVID time about your relationship, and how is that time together? Because we spent an awful lot of time at home. What have you guys learned about your relationship during that?
probably it's good to stay out of each other's hair. Luckily, we live in a big enough house, so we can get away. I don't know.
I don't know how she puts up with me. No, I'm just a scatterbrain. I mean, I used to be really well organized. I mean, I could do what I did back then, but now I'm just. I get about 7 projects started, and you could walk around the house. You'd probably find 6 or 7 projects. A pile of paper here, and I'm always up and down. I suffer from depression, and so and have for a long time, and so she has to live with this and take care of this depressed person, and she also has, a big job that she has done and continues to do with Jake.
Yeah.
So and in a lot of ways, I mean, Jake is real rigid, and
Roger's real rigid.
So, I don't know how she dances this dance. I really don't, because that's been.
I think I said that a long time ago in this interview, is don't think that you can change people.
Right.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Just go
Yeah.
with what happens.
Well, you guys have been so nice to let me in and share everything that you've shared. I really appreciate it. I find you both so fascinating, and it's so exciting to get to just ask questions and find out things that I never would have known just looking at either one of you. And it's an honor. It really is. So thank you for sharing today.
You're welcome.
You're welcome, and thank you for asking.
You bet.